Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Kiss of Snow by Elizabeth Briggs. Narrated by Stephanie Rose and Chris Chambers. Chapter 1. Lily. Heavy was the head that wore the crown, but I had no choice but to bear the weight. I'd been groomed to be Queen of Talador from the moment I was born. They'd even named me after my grandmother, Queen Lily, a wise and just monarch. I'd always known my fate was to rule. I just never expected the day to come so quickly. Father had been buried 3 months ago, and soon I would be crowned in his place. I'd delayed the moment as long as I could to give myself some time to grieve, but the kingdom needed a leader, and the day was fast approaching. In a few weeks, I would be queen. I took off the silver crown and set it down on my dresser. My fingers trembled slightly as I pushed my dark brown hair back into the elaborate style my lady's maid had fashioned, something she seemed to think befitted the new ruler of Talador. I didn't recognize my face as it looked back at me from the mirror. It was paler than usual, almost translucent, as if I could see every thought, every feeling, every worry. The room seemed to close in, the air thick and heavy, and heat suffused me. I glanced out of the window with its thick glass panes at the frosted scene outside. Air. I needed air. I drew my thickest cloak from my wardrobe, the blue one with the ruby-red trim, and threw it over my shoulders before tying the ribbon in a bow at my neck. There was something comforting about the weight, as though it helped to hold me together before anxiety fractured me apart. My head ached, throbbing in time with every step I took toward the door. A draft crept through the wide gap at the bottom, and I pictured Keane waiting just outside, against the same wall where he stood every day to guard me. As I left my bedroom, he fell silently into step behind me. He didn't ask where I was going, but then he never did. Always mere steps behind me, always quiet and steadfast. I drew confidence from his presence as I walked through the corridors of Winton Castle. My castle. Even though I kept expecting to hear my father's voice booming through the building as he decreed something new or berated an unfortunate servant or one of my sisters. In the past, that would have been Rose, but she was gone now, too. I hadn't seen any of my sisters all morning, not even Iris, who usually bounced along in a bright dress clashing with her vivid red hair. I suspected they were all keeping busy, or were still asleep. I woke early these days. Keane and I walked through the white stone corridors of the castle. I didn't know where I wanted to go, just that the castle suddenly felt too small and confining. I automatically pulled my hood up over my head as we left the castle grounds and walked into the forest, where the ground between the trees was mostly snow-free and dry. The snow couldn't always permeate the thick evergreen trees that rose above us as their fresh scent permeated the air. I breathed in deeply, glad of the familiarity. This forest had been here before I was born, and it would remain long after I died. My anxiety calmed a little, and I focused on the soft sounds of the forest, the twigs snapping underfoot, and the usual crackling noises the snow made as it shifted on the branches. But the snow also muted things, preserving me in a world alone. Well, alone aside from Keane, my constant companion and tireless protector. He'd been raised his whole life for his role as captain of the guard, inheriting it from his father, just as I inherited my new role from mine. Keane? My voice was quiet, yet strangely loud in the forest.
"Yes, Your Majesty?"
he asked, in his low, serious voice. I shook my head as I continued walking. We've known each other a long time, Keane. Away from the castle. May I just be Lily? He hesitated. Even his footsteps halted before he quickened his stride to catch up with me. I yearned to be something other than Your Majesty, but I didn't want Keane to feel uncomfortable at my request. Perhaps I'd been too forward. I waved a hand. Ignore me. I'm simply feeling anxious. About the coronation. About the future. He remained quiet, but it was his thinking quiet, the one he used when he was considering something. I could tell that even with him behind me. I'm not sure I'll make a good queen. There, I'd voiced it. In the loneliness of the forest, to the one man I trusted with my safety above all others. He scoffed quietly, probably under his breath, but I heard him.
You shouldn't worry about that. I can't imagine a better queen for Talador than you.
Even with my magic? Father had banned all magic in Talador, including what I'd inherited from my mother, who was an accomplished wizard. Felina was my father's first queen and only love. After she'd died, he'd married many more women, but Mother was the queen I most aspired to be like. I wanted to be a good leader to my people. I just wasn't ready. Not yet. I miss Father. These were also quiet words, because in many ways I had no reason at all to miss him. With each new wife and each year he passed on the throne, he'd grown harsher and colder. I'd worried over my magic, and especially Rose's magic, as she defied him by attempting to train herself. Thankfully, she had married King Wraith, and in Illidan she could practice her magic freely. But Father's death had left me with the responsibility of Iris, and who knew how her mother's magic would manifest in my youngest sister.
I can understand that.
Keane spoke with no judgment, but it wasn't the careful control a lot of the other staff had when they replied to me, and I was grateful for the honesty that shone through in our conversations.
You only get one father, and I'm sorry yours has been taken away.
I took a deep breath, inhaling the icy air, so it froze the sob trapped inside. I missed Father, but I wouldn't cry for him today. We still don't know how he got sick and succumbed so quickly. I turned to face Keane and took in his dark gold hair and chiseled jaw. With his towering height and broad shoulders, I couldn't ignore how striking he looked in the blue and white armor of my kingdom. My queendom now, I supposed. But his dark blue eyes weren't on me.
Lily!
My name tore from his lips, his tone urgent.
Get behind me!
My gaze snapped to the collection of black figures running in our direction. Bandits? They seemed a long way from the nearest road, but anything was possible. As they drew closer, Keane thrust his arm toward me, as though he could shield me, while reaching for his ever-present sword at his hip. I hesitated. My magic. I could use it now, without fear of repercussions from my father and his laws forbidding it. Would I be fast enough to stop them? I knew a few runes, but I hadn't practiced like Rose had. If something I did backfired, I could end up hurting all of us. One of the figures darted toward me, a gleaming sword held out in front of him, and he aimed it for my chest. Keane shoved me behind him, and I stumbled, then regained my balance. He slashed at the man with his sword, only for us to watch the bandit disappear in a swirl of black smoke that drifted away in the breezeless air. More men surrounded us, with swords that sliced through the air. We were vastly outnumbered, but Keane dodged and swirled, protecting me with his every breath, while I stood there feeling helpless. As Keane attacked, every single one of them dissipated in the same way, leaving a faint smell of bitter herbs behind. But then, one of them managed to break between Keane's defenses and slashed at me. I darted away just in time, so he only sliced through my cloak, shredding it immediately. It seemed the attackers could hurt us, even though they disappeared when we touched them. Keane stopped the man by throwing a knife into his forehead, saving me from another attack. After Keane defeated the last one, he turned to me.
I don't know what that was, but I do know we need to get you home.
I nodded, the shock of it all momentarily stealing my words. He didn't walk behind me this time. We stepped quickly through the forest, with Keane holding my arm to steady me and keep me close, while he looked all around us for more attackers. His watchfulness reassured me, but worry also began to gnaw in my gut. What had those men been? Apparitions of some sort, possibly illusion magic. But from where? From who? Had I been targeted specifically? Or were we just unlucky enough to be walking in the forest at the exact moment someone unleashed a spell? I found that last one hard to believe.
Are you well?
As usual, Keane was composed, and he sounded genuine without being overly concerned we'd faced a possible attack.
I'm sorry if I was too rough back there.
I glanced at him, but his face was the same as always, impassive and unreadable. His gentle grip around my upper arm felt nothing but reassuring. No, you weren't too rough, I assured him. You were protecting me, as always, and I thank you for it. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there.
Me either,
he murmured. His jaw tightened, and he quickened our pace back to the castle.
Chapter 2. Keane. Something about Lily's office always soothed me. This space, where she did most of her work or studied texts on how to rule Talador, offered fragrant scents and feminine touches, as if the whole room had taken on some of her essence. A fire burned merrily in the fireplace, and her soft furnishings created a cozy atmosphere, a bubble of warmth that I actively enjoyed being enclosed in. She murmured aloud as she bent her head over the note she was writing to her sister Rose. More than anyone, Rose would understand today's attack, and perhaps even be able to offer some advice. From what I'd heard, Rose's own magical abilities seemed to grow by the day, surpassing even the expectations of her wizard husband, King Wraith of Illidan. "I don't want to worry Rose," Lily muttered. "But—" She trailed off, probably taking the rest of her thought internal. She hadn't actually been talking to me anyway, nothing that required a response, as I stood in my usual spot just inside the door and watched her, ready to defend and protect her should the need arise. Lily's life meant more to me than my own after all my years at her side, and after years of guidance and training from my father, the captain of the guard before me. Protecting her was as much instinct as it was my duty. The attack earlier today had been troubling and unexpected, made worse by the fact that magic was involved. My fists clenched at the memory. I'd been able to stop the apparitions, but I had no magic myself, and could only do so much against it. Extra vigilance was required. Lily shifted and loosened her hair from its elaborate style, and I tore my gaze from the glimpse of her pale neck. "That's better. It's hard to think with a headache." I could tell how stressed she was, and my throat tightened at the thought of all the worries she'd inherited after the death of her father. We'd all inherited more responsibility since the loss of King Balsam. My father had retired, and I'd been promoted into his place. But I loved my job. I loved protecting Lily. I shook myself from my thoughts, even as I stood perfectly still and alert in her presence. I couldn't think about Lily and all she meant to me, not when the attack this morning in the forest was still so shrouded in mystery. Clearly, Lily wouldn't be safe until we ascertained who was responsible and how they'd carried it out. Magic was unfamiliar in Talador, now that it had been forbidden for so long. King Balsam had outlawed it after the death of his first wife, and the penalties for anyone found to be practicing it were steep. Even with her new role, Lily faced a decision. Her own magic could be powerful. Rose's was, after all. But would she follow in her father's footsteps and keep magic forbidden? Or would she open her country back up to people's natural abilities? I didn't envy her decisions in these next few weeks and months, but I had faith in them. Lily considered everything with great care. She'd confided in me many times about how she wrestled with the best way to be a good daughter and a good monarch. Now that her moment was here, she didn't need to worry. She would shine, and everyone in Talador would see her as I did. At a sharp rap on the door behind me, I buried my thoughts and quickly stepped away, allowing whoever it was to enter at Lily's quiet permission. Even her voice stirred feelings in me that I didn't have a right to possess. The door opened, letting in a draft from the rest of the castle. Princess Dahlia walked into the room, her quiet steps barely making a noise as befitted the wife of the leader of the Ravens. She was also the king's sister and Lily's aunt. For many years, Dahlia had acted as King Balsam's advisor and de facto queen, when the role lay vacant between his wives. Lily rose from her seat as Dahlia swept a curtsy. "Oh, don't do that. We're family, and you've practically been queen yourself for years." Dahlia brushed back a stray piece of dark brown hair in the same shade as Lily's. "Things are different now that you're going to be the true queen soon. In fact, that's why I'm here. We need to discuss some important matters." "I have some time now. Sit, please." Lily indicated the small chaise in the corner of the office with a delicate wave of her hand. She walked from around her desk to join her aunt, her message to Rose set to one side for the time being. "Is something wrong?" "We need to discuss your future." Dahlia took Lily's hands as they sat together, their bodies angled toward one another, their knees nearly touching. Both wore elegant dresses when they moved, Lily's in a becoming shade of blue as it stretched across her breasts. I averted my gaze as my trousers tightened, focusing out of the window, although awareness of Lily bat like a second pulse inside my head. "My future?" Lily asked. "Your coronation is fast approaching, but the nobles have been talking, grumbling more like it. Your father's death was a surprise. No one expected it so soon. They're worried you're a bit too young and inexperienced to take on the role as queen." Lily dropped Dahlia's hands and sat back sharply with a frown. "I've been training and preparing for my role as queen for my entire life. Why do they doubt my capabilities?" "There is much turmoil in the kingdom, even with the recent peace with Illidan. Tensions with Mesner are still high, and relations with the other kingdoms are uncertain. The nobles are not sure you can handle the challenges ahead of us." Lily's lips pressed together, and I could tell she was upset but trying to remain calm. "Who do they think would be a better queen?" Dahlia folded her hands in her lap. "No one is questioning your right to be queen. Some have suggested that I act as regent until you're ready, but I have declined. I think you are more than ready for the role. But perhaps we should do something to allay the fears of the nobles." "What is it you suggest we do?" Dahlia looked Lily in the eye. "Something you won't want to hear, but something you know is necessary." With a heavy sigh, Lily turned her head to look out the window at the snow-topped trees. "You wish me to find a husband?" My chest clenched at the last word. Of course they would want Lily to marry. It made sense for the stability of the kingdom, but the very thought made my stomach heavy with dread. "Yes," Dahlia said. "I know your father urged you to do the same before he passed." "He did, but I told him I wasn't ready. I have so much to do, and still so much to learn. I have no time for a husband, especially if I'm trying to be a good queen to my people." Dahlia leaned forward. "I don't believe you have the luxury of waiting on this. It's important you're crowned after you're married, so your people can see a queen who is settled and stable and ready to rule." Lily stood and began pacing, something she did when she was frustrated. "I don't see why I should have to marry to solidify my right to be queen. No one asks such a thing of a king, do they?" Dahlia looked down and sighed. "No, they do not. It is unfair, and I do not wish this forced upon you. However, I do think you should at least consider meeting with some suitors. Simply show the nobles that you are open to the possibility of marriage with some of the people they suggest, and it will do a lot to get them on your side. You don't actually have to marry any of them, if none of them suit you." "I have no intention of getting married any time soon. In fact, it's the last thing on my mind. I have to grieve my father and do my best to rule the kingdom as a new queen." Lily paused and drew in a deep breath, then smoothed the front of her dress. "But I suppose I can at least meet with some suitable men. Do you have any in mind?" "I have a list of 7 suitors prepared already. Some are suggestions from the nobles themselves, and some are nobles from other kingdoms. An alliance with one of the other kingdoms would serve us well, especially if we go to war with Mesner." Lily tilted her head as though considering Dahlia's words, but she didn't speak. "It's even more important now, after the attack on you in the forest," Dahlia added. "We don't know that was targeted at me. It doesn't matter. In times like these, as much as we may hate it, you need to be seen to have a man at your side." Dahlia was firm but gentle, although I bristled internally at her words. I'd always been the man by Lily's side. I'd protected her and kept her safe for years now. But even as I resented the idea Dahlia wanted another man to fill that role for Lily, a king or queen's consort, bitter recognition trickled through me. It was the difference between my secret love for Lily and her need to be the queen to her people. My place was a pace behind her, not at her side, and it would always be that way. Lily flicked her skirts in the way she always did when something had agitated her, before she began to pace again, each of her measured steps brushing her long dress over the rugs on the stone floor. "You said 7 suitors? Is that not a lot?" "Yes, 7. Dahlia lifted a delicate eyebrow. "Wouldn't you rather choose a husband from a larger selection instead of 1 or 2 potential men?" Lily returned to her seat on the chaise. "Are you quite sure this is the only way?" "Quite sure. I've already started making the arrangements, and all of the men are very happy to meet you." Of course they were. Who wouldn't be happy to be considered for the husband to the Queen of Talador? I realized my fists were clenched, and I forced them to relax. I'd stood behind Lily on many occasions, listening to members of her family discuss her future husband. I should have been numb to it by now, but I wasn't. I feared I never would be. Lily pinched the bridge of her nose. "I don't doubt that you've found the most suitable men you can. But is now really the right time? If the castle is attacked again, are we not endangering these 7 men too? Yes, I was just about to bring that up. I can arrange for the suitors to meet you at your summer palace. It's more intimate there. Safer, too. I stiffened. It seemed as if all of the arrangements really had been made already. Dahlia was right, though. After today's attack, Gilbrook Castle might be safer for Lily, at least while my people conducted their investigation of it. I hope they won't be expecting actual summer there. Lily stood again, and I wanted to catch her in my arms and soothe her restless state away. She stood for a moment by the window, looking down the hill we sat atop of, toward Ralston, the capital. Then she turned back toward me, her face pinched, a crease forming between her eyebrows. "Captain Keane, what do you think?" I cleared my throat at the unexpected question. "I agree it is wise to visit Gilbrook Castle for some time, so that we may ensure your safety." I paused before adding, "As to the other matter, I could not possibly comment." "Thank you, Keane," Lily said, before turning back to her aunt. "I can't say I'm not reluctant, but I've always trusted your judgment and guidance. I will agree to meet with these suitors, though I can't guarantee I will marry any of them." "That is all I ask," Dahlia said, bowing her head. "I have no wish to force you into marriage. I simply wish to strengthen your rule however I can." "I know." Lily offered Dahlia a warm smile. "I'm grateful for all of your help, and I'm lucky to have you as my advisor, just as my father did." She sounded so regal already. How did she not realize she was already prepared to be queen? How did the foolish nobleman not realize that also? And would any of her 7 suitors see her as I did?
Chapter 3. Lily. "Sit down, Iris." I gave the order without any real compulsion for her to do as I said. Among my family, I was the oldest sister, not the queen. Still, she flopped dramatically into her usual chair. "I'm not hungry." I glanced around the supper table at my sisters, and my chest tightened at the one who was missing. Rose. Closest to me in age, we shared the same mother, and Rose had been my usual confidant. But she had a different life now, one that Dahlia wanted for me. A husband, a kingdom, and a crown on our heads. I swallowed and composed myself, then faced my remaining 4 sisters. Without Rose, I'd have to make do with their counsel instead. With their varied skills, interests, and ages, I'd get wildly different opinions and feedback. Even from the twins, Violet and Camellia, who were opposite of each other in every way. We were sharing supper together in our private dining room as we did almost every night, even since before Father passed away. It was a tradition among my sisters and I to meet up like this at the end of the day and discuss matters. "What's troubling you, Lily?" Jasmine asked. She was the 3rd oldest, after me and Rose, and could always tell when one of us was upset. There was no point doing anything other than coming straight out with it. "Dahlia wants me to marry as soon as possible. She has arranged for 7 suitors to meet with me." Camelia's mouth dropped open. "7 men in the castle? Will any of them be soldiers?" Her love of fighting drew her regularly to the palace guards to protect her sparring. Violet nudged her. "Don't be ridiculous, Cam. They'll be men of noble blood, refined. Some of them might even like reading." Jasmine laughed, her eyes warm. "Being able to fight and being able to read aren't mutually exclusive. But we should let Lily tell us what's happening rather than guessing. We're not being helpful." On the contrary, I stopped and leaned back as a servant filled my water glass. "You're being very helpful. Maybe some of this speculation will narrow down what I want in a man. Keane shifted his position as he stood behind me.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?